Hey guys, in this video, I wanted to talk about smart water meters. Now, a lot of people and a lot of different clients of mine, they're really concerned about what's going on here. And really what's happening here, at least in the country of Canada, we're really doing a massive upgrade where we're taking the old analog water meters, we're taking them out of the house and we're replacing them with smart technology. And this is happening in multiple cities, especially here in Ontario where I live. And in the city where I live here in Mississauga, we started doing this back in the springtime, maybe early summer is when we started this. And this is really when I started getting my first notices. We fast forward a few months here to December, which is when I'm recording this video. There really is, I took a walk around my neighborhood, and really I am pretty much the only person that has not had this installed in my home yet. And I've talked to many people, many clients of mine. I've heard their stories. There's a lot of crazy things happening here. And I've heard from clients who are, really concerned about having this put into their house. They're asking questions and they're really trying to, delay the process. What's happening is a lot of these companies, the water companies especially, what they're doing is they're actually threatening people to turn their water off if they do not comply. And some cities are actually proposing a fine. Like you could be charged if you do not comply. I'm getting a lot of phone calls from people and emails from people that are going through this process right now, and they're really concerned about this, especially with the technology that they're using, the EMF and everything that's going on there. And they're really asking me, Kevin, what can we do about this? To be honest with you guys, I'm really struggling with this one because, if we go back about 10 years ago, we look at the smart hydrometer that we started putting on our homes. I remember back then, if you really didn't want to have this put onto your home, there was an option where you could keep your old analog meter. And I think you'd have to pay a little bit more a month because it would be, they'd have to come and do their manual readings. But there was an option for you to do that. And I think even today, I know people around the Toronto area that don't have a smart meter. So there are options for people if you really wanted to explore that. But when we look at smart water meters, I mean, there really doesn't seem to be any options here. What they're doing is, these companies, they're just coming in and, the water companies really are behind this. They're just kind of bullying people around and saying, look, if you don't comply, we're just going to turn your water off, period. And I know this has happened to people. Like I said, I'm really struggling on trying to find any, good solution for people. And, there's a good reason why. And this video is really to explore that, to kind of get you into my mindset on this, because we got some serious problems here, guys, like serious problems. And really, it has everything to do with the electrical standards that we have in place. And especially here in Canada, we use something that's called Safety Code 6. We're going to talk about this in a minute. And as far as these companies concerned, there's, the company that's doing the install here in Mississauga. It's a company called Neptune. You can see their product line on the screen in front of you. And I know in other cities they're using different products. I know one of the, if you get to cities like Cambridge, maybe over Kitchener-Waterloo area, they're using a company called Census. That's what's making the water meters. And really they operate really pretty much on the same principle, but all of these companies, really what is important to know is that they comply to our current electrical standards on what's safe as far as, the EMF goes for human exposure. And to me, this is really what's given, the water companies really the ammunition to really go in and kind of bully their way into this. For me, this is the problem. Because these standards, which we're going to briefly just go through these because it's important for you guys to see this. These standards are to me, they're completely inadequate. I'm going to show you why I'm saying this as this video goes along. So really this video, we're going to dive in. We're going to look at the actual technology. We're going to see how these things work. And then we're going to look at really some of the standards here on why these companies do comply to these standards. This is why we're able to just come into your house and force these into the home. And we're going to take a look at those. And at the end, we're going to actually do some EMF testing. I'm going to show you guys what these things are doing from an EMF perspective, so you get an idea what could be going on within your home. So first, let's actually take a look at the actual water meter. Now this here on your screen here on the left-hand side, I'm circling it here with my mouse. It's a Neptune T10 water meter. This is what they're putting on people's homes here in Mississauga. This is very interesting because there's a few things that I really want to look at here. I think it's important for you guys to know. And really what happens is if you look here on the left-hand side of this meter, water really comes into the inlet here and it goes out the outlet on the other side. And really inside this black housing, really what there is there's a little paddle wheel inside there that spins whenever you turn your water on. And depending on how fast it spins, depending on, what time of day it's spinning, I mean, you can get a lot of data from this. You can figure out how much water you're using and when you're using it and when the peak times are and pretty much all that stuff can happen from this. But if we look down here at the bottom here, I got it circled in red. That little measuring chamber, that little paddle wheel that I talked about, it says here this nutating disk technology design is made from proprietary synthetic polymer material. And I thought this was very interesting here to really show you guys because if we look up at the top here, there are some standards that this company had to use to make this device. And one in particular here is this NSF ANSI 61 standard. And what this is it actually shows you what chemicals are allowed to be leached into your water. There's safe guidelines involved in this standard. But really what's important here is that it only studies regulated substances. And in a condition like this, where we have a proprietary substance like this synthetic polymer, it seems to me like this proprietary technology that they're using can really fly under the radar here of what is acceptable in this standard, especially when we're only looking at regulated substances. So really, in my view here, guys, I think if you're really concerned about this, what I would be doing is that I would be, questioning this company here and looking at, can they supply you with any testing here on this? Have we actually tested to see what chemicals could be leaching into the water here? And if anything, number two, I'd also be looking for maybe an MSDS sheet, a material safety data sheet, which will really look at the materials and look at any of the potential hazards that could come with it. I would be asking them for some data on this because, you got to think about this because all your water that feeds your home, your showers, your drinking water, everything, all your water is going to be passing through this device. So it's going to be in direct contact with this spinning paddle wheel consistently. And it's made from a material that's completely synthetic and it's proprietary and we have no idea what it is. So to me here, this is really I think this is a red flag because, these companies are trying to barge their way into our houses, put this thing into our homes where a lot of us don't really feel comfortable putting this in our homes. And then you do something like this, where you're disclosing the, materials that are synthetic, it's proprietary, and you're not telling people what they're made of. It's something that is of concern, at least it is to me. So I just wanted to mention that. I think it's important for everybody to know this. Now, the second part of this smart water meter is actually what's called the endpoint. And you can see here on the very left side of your screen, this is a Neptune R900 endpoint. So really what this is, it's really a transceiver is really what it is. It transmits and receives wireless data. And it's something that goes onto the side of your house. There's a little antenna. You can see here, this little disc antenna. This is what's transmitting and receiving the data. And like I said, this endpoint gets mounted on the side of your house. Now, just a few specifications. I want to just talk quickly about, how this thing works. So really the first thing that caught my eye here, if we look at the technical specifications, this particular endpoint, it uses a lithium-ion battery with a capacitor. And I wanted to bring this up because I know a lot of people are actually concerned about this, where since it's using a lithium-ion battery, there is definitely the possibility, the very slight possibility that, these things could catch on fire. And it has been known to happen in the past with lithium-ion batteries. There's no question about that. And I know the companies that are doing the install, they're really telling people that the risk is extremely low here. But whatever the case, I think it's something that, there is a concern here. There's no question. And this is something that I think you should all be aware of because this thing is going to be mounted on the side of your home. Now, the next thing I wanted to look at is the actual transmitter. how this transmitter of this wireless EMF, let's take a look at how this works. So right here in the center of your screen, I got it circled. It's a two-way endpoint. Like I said, that just means it transmits and receives data. And there's really two ways on this thing, on how this thing can work. If you look here right in the center of your screen here, I'm just kind of circling it here with my mouse. This right at the top here, there's something that's actually called a mobile data collector. So what this device can do, so you can see here, there's a standard mobile message that's sent out every 14 seconds at 100 milliwatts of power. So this device here is going to send out that signal. And what can happen here is this mobile data collector, somebody could just walk by your house or even drive by in a car. And really with the push of a button, they can really upload all of the data from your device. So they can take a look at your usage and how much you're using and when you're using it and all that stuff. It can really be done with the click of a button as somebody's pretty much right in front of your house. That's kind of why the power level is a little bit lower. As you can see, it's 100 milliwatts of power, which is quite low, but it doesn't have to transmit that far because somebody's just going to be driving or walking by. So that's really the first way on how this can work. But there's a second way, which is also very important to know, is that you can see here there's a fixed gateway. And what this device is that you can see this here, this standard fixed network gateway. It sends a message every 7.5 minutes at 1 watt. So now what we're dealing with is we're dealing with a power level that's about 10 times higher. And this fixed gateway here, what it can do is that it can actually be put on a hydro pole. It can be put on the top of a building. And what it can do is it can connect up to 26 homes. So you can imagine in your whole neighborhood here, you could have up to 26 houses all communicating directly to this gateway. And the power level is going to be significantly higher. But from what I'm seeing here, at least from the homes that do have this installed, what I'm seeing is that most of them operate on this mobile data collector. So the power level is a little bit lower, and it's designed that way so people can just catch your data as they're driving by your house. And most homes, like I said, are designed this way for now. But there is a possibility that at any given time, they can decide that they can connect everything to this fixed gateway, which will allow your device to transmit information at a much higher power level now. And there is the possibility that you may never know when this could take place. And I think it's important for you guys to see this, because I know this mobile data collector, I've heard that they're having actually issues with this, reading your data, and there are some problems with this. So, in the near future, there could be the possibility where everybody would be switched possibly to this, fixed gateway where everybody's communicating to this, central gateway device. Now, one more thing to mention with this section here too on the transmitter is that this transmitter, it does comply with Health Canada Safety Code 6 EMF exposure guidelines. They do comply with this, which is why they're just freely trying to get this in everybody's homes, because they do have compliance. And we're going to come back to this because I'm going to show you really what this means in a second, because I told you how I believe this standard is completely inadequate. We're gonna see why in just a few seconds or a few minutes. Now, the last thing I wanted to mention just about this transmitter, the actual data that's being transmitted, I wanted to talk quickly just about the technology on how this thing works. So you can see here down at the bottom, I've got it circled here. This transmitter, it actually has 50 different channels, and it operates from within 910 to 920 megahertz. And it uses a technology called frequency hopping spread spectrum. So if you can imagine here, this 910 to 920 band of frequencies here, we've got 50 evenly spaced channels throughout this. And what can happen here, as I showed a little simulation of this down in the bottom right corner, you can see what's really happening is it's almost like there's bullets of data that's coming off these channels, and it's very random. You have no idea what channel they could be coming from. It's hopping all over the place. And it really is like bullets of data that's being pulsed here with this technology. And I think this is very interesting for you guys to know, because, the way that this technology works, if this is something that's in our environment consistently for the next, potentially several years, decades even, then how's our biology, with everything that's inside of us, our metabolic system, how is it going to respond to that? And that's the question that I'm asking. And we're going to see that really some of the standards that we're using, especially this Health Canada standard, Safety Code 6, is really truly inadequate for helping us here. Now, one other thing I need to bring up here too is we need to actually talk about the actual smart hydrometer for a few seconds here. Because if we look over here on the right-hand side, just under me, you can see we got a little bit of specifications on how this thing works. And this smart hydrometer, it actually works. You can see it says 902 to 928 megahertz. Now, this is very important to bring up because this is really right in that same frequency as the smart water meter. So the two of them really seem to be competing in the same band of frequencies. And like I said, it's important for me to bring this up because when we get to the testing section, when I start testing the water meter, since I have no way of isolating and taking the smart hydrometer out of the equation, because I can't shut off the power to people's homes. I don't have the ability to do that. I really have no true way of knowing whether, what I'm measuring is from the smart hydrometer or the smart water meter. So it is important to bring that up, but I am using a spectrum analyzer where I can tune into a specific band of frequencies. So I am going to be looking at the smart water meter, that band, 910 to 920. So we're going to see, but I just wanted to mention to you guys that there's a lot of action happening in this frequency here, this 900 megahertz frequency, and it's going to be important to know this because I want to talk a little bit more about this specific frequency. And the last thing I just wanted to mention here as well before we move on is that these smart hydrometers, you can see they all comply with this Health Canada Safety Code 6, this, the EMF exposure guidelines on what's safe for us. So now looking at this 900 megahertz frequency here, that the smart water meter, the smart hydrometer, this is how they're operating. We did a study back in 1974. It's for the US Army. And the study here is on Dr. Magda Havis's website. Now, Dr. Magda Havis, she's an EMF scientist. She's been doing this type of work for many, many years. She's doing some amazing work. And I've actually talked about this study in other videos on my site. So I'm not going to get into the details again about what's going on with this study. But what's important here is that in this study, they used a number of different frequencies. And they blasted these frequencies at these rats. And what they found in the conclusions to all this, they found that there were two frequencies specifically that were the most lethal. And it's showing here, it's 950 megahertz and 2.4 gigahertz. And we knew this, back in the 1970s. This is how far back this goes. Now, what's important about this study here is that we did use power levels that were significantly higher than what we would normally see in people's homes. So you can see down here in the bottom right of your screen here, they actually used up to 2 million microwatts per meter squared in this particular study. And they did this for low doses from up to 10 to 300 seconds. So it was very short doses that they exposed these rats to. And what they found was very significant. Some of these rats were getting tumors. Some of these rats were having problems with their blood. Their lungs and respiratory tracts were affected. A lot of crazy things were happening here. And we knew this a long time ago. And I think it's important for you guys to know this as well, because we're kind of building to something here. But what I see right away from this study here is that, this 900 megahertz and this 2.4 gigahertz, 2.4 gigahertz is what we use this is Wi-Fi. This is Bluetooth. This is a lot of baby monitors use this frequency. 900 megahertz, we got the smart water meter, the smart hydrometer. It's another frequency highly used in 5G. These are we're using these frequencies all over the place. And these frequencies here, the 900 megahertz and the 2.4 gigahertz, they're absorbed by water. This is very important to know. And I think we have a clue here on really what we need to study if we want to get more accurate EMF standards, because the resonant frequency of water is close to 2.4 gigahertz. And this is how your microwave oven fundamentally works. We blast our food with this frequency and it starts to vibrate the water molecules so fast that it starts to heat and cook your food. It cooks the food from within itself. And of course, with microwave ovens, we're using it at significantly high power levels than what we see in Wi-Fi. It's very important to know that. But still, nonetheless, these two frequencies are absorbed by water. And we've known this for a long, long time. So if we can just quickly summarize what we've got here, guys. I mean, we've got these two frequencies, this 900 megahertz and this 2.4 gigahertz frequencies. I mean, they've known to be destructive. We've known this for 50 years now. You know, we fast forward from, when we did all these studies on rats to today, where we are in 2025. This is December when I'm shooting this video. I mean, these two frequencies are arguably the two most dominant frequencies that we're going to see in our environment today. I mean, they're completely filling all of our spaces, where we're, our homes, our businesses. If we consider as well what I've been saying about these two frequencies on how they're well absorbed on water, we really have to wonder if there's something else going on here. And in my view, and my personal perspective from what I'm seeing here, I throw some red flags up on this, because to me, what's really happening here is the water network that's inside the body. To me, it's completely under attack. So now I quickly want to just go over this Health Canada Safety Code 6 standard. I mean, it's important to talk about this because all of our smart meters, they have to comply to this. And the Safety Code 6, what's also important here is that this standard is very much in tune with a lot of the other standards that we use throughout the world. So the standards that we're using in the United States, the European Union, Australia, Japan, all of these standards, I mean, the Safety Code 6 standard is a very cohesive standard. It seems to be very much in tune with what we're using in other places around the world. So it's very important to know this. But there's one specific section that I wanted to just talk about here that really deals with the allowable limits of this ambient electromagnetic radiation that can be buzzing in our environment. And it comes from section 2.2.2. You can see I'm just highlighting it here in red. And what it says is, it allows 26,000 microwatts per meter squared of time averaged power density within the environment over a reference period of 6 minutes. So what this is it's a time averaged calculation. So there's a heavy mathematical equation involved in calculating this. It's not like what we see with other standards, like the building biologist standard, for example. We're going to be talking about this in a minute. But what they really just use peak power density levels. They really want to see how high these peaks can really get within the environment. The peaks that could be happening throughout this time period, this reference period that they're talking about, these peaks could be going well above this 26,000 microwatts per meter squared. But this level, to me, it's way too high. But there is a reason why it exists. And it has everything to do with this body of knowledge, which is called the science of dosimetry. Now, this is the body of knowledge that really tells us how this electromagnetic radiation with the environment interacts with the human body. So really, when I was looking at all this, and I started looking at this dosimetry handbook, understanding what they believe this mechanism of interaction is between how these frequencies interact with the body. What I'm seeing here, when we're looking at how they're describing this, we are never ever going to see how these potential frequencies here could really be disturbing the body in the long term. To me, we're never ever going to be able to see that as long as we continue to use this body of knowledge, which is telling us that we need to look inside the individual cell inside the body, and we're looking for these inner electric field disturbances here, these changes, this depolarization type of event that's happening inside the cell. That's where we seem to be looking. Whereas I've been suggesting, no, I think we're looking in the wrong places here. We need to be looking in the environment around the body. This is where I think we're going to see some significant things, and how that field of energy that's around the body, how it connects inside the body, which involves water. And I've talked about that already in previous videos, so I don't want to get into all that, but I just wanted to bring this up because As long as this body of knowledge continues to exist, I just don't think we're ever going to see how destructive these frequencies could truly be to the human body. So this to me, guys, is why we're seeing such high power density levels that are allowable. Because to me, you truly need this higher level intensity in order to see this type of depolarization event to happen within the cell, which is what this science of dosimetry is really looking at. And I think we really need these higher power density levels to get there. But to me, I think we're truly missing the mark here on how this electromagnetic radiation truly interacts with the body. I think there's much, much more subtle effects taking place within the body that we'll never be able to see as long as this science still exists. Now, one very, very important thing that I think we need to just touch on within this Safety Code 6 standard, and really all of the standards, is something that's actually called the specific absorption rate. Now, this is something that's very central to these standards here on how we believe this electromagnetic radiation is absorbed into the tissues, the soft tissues within the body. And this SAR rating, this is what we use to evaluate cell phones. If we consider putting our cell phone next to our head or very, very close to our head, this is the part of the standard that we would be using. Because this standard becomes active whenever we have these electromagnetic radiating sources within 20 centimeters of the body. So you can see down here at the very bottom here, section 2.1.2 of this standard, this is what specifies what's allowable. And in this specific example that I'm using, it's what's allowable to be absorbed within the head area. So if we just quickly focus in here on the graphic that I got here in the center of the screen, this really shows you how this test is done. So what we've got here on the left-hand side here, we've got a robot that comes down here. We've got a probe that really sits into this cavity on this table. And what this cavity is, it's trying to simulate the human body. So up at the top here, you can see this is where the head would be. We've got the torso here in the middle, and we've got the legs down here at the bottom. And what they do is they fill this cavity with what's called a tissue simulating liquid. And what they believe is that this tissue simulating liquid very much simulates the electrical properties of the tissues within our body. So really what happens is what they do is they put an electromagnetic radiating device underneath this cavity. Like you can see here, we've got a mobile phone they would put right underneath the head. And they would turn it on, they would get all the data active. And what they would do is they would stick this probe into this tissue simulating liquid and try and see, how much of this electromagnetic energy would be absorbed from within that area that they have that probe. But really what's very, very interesting about all this that I've noticed is that when I looked into this tissue simulating liquid on what it's made of, it's actually what it is. It's a deionized water based. So it's an H2O water base that they're using, which to me is very, very interesting because deionized water, even though it's a very, very pure source of water, it's completely dead. It's a dead water source. And it's to me, it's very important for us to see that, because if we're trying to simulate, the electrical activity within the body, I mean, from my perspective, all of the water that's inside of our body is completely structured and living. It's a living, structured water network that we truly have inside of us, not a dead, deionized water source. So right here, from my perspective, this tells me that, we're so off the mark on what is truly going on here. And a lot of these tests, to me, this is why I'm suggesting to you that these standards are completely inadequate, because we're not simulating the body as it is. So I really wanted to just, touch on these parts of this standard so you can see this for yourself. That no matter what results that they come up with, it's never going to be truly accurate to how the body is truly operating. Now, really, as a solution to this, there's something that's actually called the building biologist guidelines. Now, this is something that I do reference because I do see it is helpful for getting an idea and assessing, what's going on within a person's environment. And really what the building biologist guidelines do is they really look at the measured ambient peak radiation levels within the environment. And if you take a look at this image here, I got in the center of the screen here, these are the guidelines, and I'm circling here in red the high frequency guidelines. This is all the wireless stuff that's happening in our environment. And you can see here, just focus in here, just have a look at this yellow section. And what it's saying here, it's actually saying 0.1 to 10 microwatts per meter squared, where we actually have a slight concern. And I mean, this is a drastic difference from something like Safety Code 6, where we look at really 26,000 microwatts per meter squared for 6 minutes is considered a problem. Whereas this standard here looks at peak power density levels that are much, much, much lower than that. And there is a reason why these standards exist, because what the scientists have found is that this low-level ambient electromagnetic energy in the range of around 10 microwatts per meter squared what can happen is it can really disturb the cell membrane. What can happen is that it can influence what's called the voltage-gated calcium channels on the cell membrane. And what can happen is that it can actually cause calcium influx. So what can happen is we can have a lot more calcium entering into the cell than really what the cell is looking for. And this can cause all kinds of communication chaos inside the cell. And what we were finding, there actually is studies on this from scientists like Martin Pall. He's a biochemist. He's actually shown that this is actually a reality now. And it can happen at very, very, very low power density levels in the range of around 10 microwatts. And for something like Safety Code 6, they don't even consider this. So this standard really helps with that. But this is not a recognized standard here in Canada. So a lot of these companies that are making these electronic devices, they don't have to comply to this. All they have to comply to is the Health Canada Safety Code 6. So for me, right away, this is a problem. This is a serious problem that we have. Now, having said that, this building biologist, these guidelines, they are good. But to me, we're not there yet, guys. There's more that we need to get to here. And this particular standard here with the building biologist guidelines, they don't consider frequency. Like I said, it's not really frequency dependent. It's just how much of the peak radiation levels are in the environment across a whole range of frequencies. Doesn't seem to matter which ones. And some of them are more destructive, like I said, and I think this is important. But these studies don't seem to look at that. And these building biologist standards don't seem to look at the actual nature of this signal, the signal that's in our environment, like this frequency hopping spread spectrum technology, where it's like being pulsed through different channels, like randomly, producing, potentially causing a lot of chaos here. And we don't look at the nature of the signal at all. And there's lots of other technologies as well. It's not just this frequency hopping technology. There's other technologies like in our Wi-Fi, this OFDM technology. I'm not going to get into that, but there are other ways on how we actually modulate the information within the frequency envelope that we're sending through the space. And we need to look at this. We have to. We can't ignore this stuff, guys, because this is all potentially causing all kinds of chaos inside of us. We're not looking at it. And in my view, guys, we really need to focus in on this very, very low level electromagnetic radiation that's in our environment. And this type of radiation we're going to see from the smart water meter. We're going to see from the smart hydrometer. We're going to see from the testing that I've done. It fills the entire space of our living spaces. And it's a low, low, low level. And we're not looking at that. I mean, we're not even looking at the building biologist guidelines at all, at least here in Canada. But these guidelines show us that at least 10 microwatts of power is enough to disturb the calcium channels. But anything below, if you look at the building biologist sheet here, I just put it up here at the bottom. You can see that in the green zone, we've got 0.1 microwatts peak power. And there's really no concern if the radiation levels are below that, according to these guidelines. And I have to wonder, like, to me, I don't agree. I don't agree that we can say that. And let me just put this into perspective for you here. You can see on the screen, let's consider the iPhone. So the iPhone, when we actually have a signal connected to our iPhone, we have data, we have a phone call, and this is active. There's a minimum signal strength that we need to keep that data and phone call active. And what we found is that it's in the range of about -85 to 100 dBm. Now, if we convert that over, what that works out to be is about 0.000003 microwatts of power. And our iPhones are designed to work on that, potentially. They could drop out around this level, but there's a possibility we could still make a connection. Like this level of power is extremely low, well below the acceptable limits of the building biologist guidelines of 0.1 microwatts. So we have to wonder if our iPhone receiving circuit is sensitive enough to work on this level of power. I mean, what, the human body doesn't feel this? Like, really? Like, come on, guys. Like, think about that for a second. An iPhone is designed to work on this, but yet our bodies are just not, like, we're immune to this. I'm hoping you guys are following me on this. As you can see, we got lots of problems. And, these smart water meter devices, they work on health, like as far as Health Canada goes, they're safe. I showed you these standards don't work. They're inadequate for what we need. We have something that's called the Building Biologist Guidelines. They help us a little bit more here, whereas they look at the ambient radiation in the background, but only to a certain point. At a certain power level, everything seems to be safe according to them. Like I mentioned, 0.1 microwatts. But our iPhones can work at much, 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 much lower levels of power. And we have to wonder if that low chronic level of power distribution that's being put out into our spaces can still impair, like still interact with the body at a chronic low level that we're not even considering yet. So now we get to the section here where I just want to explain to you guys what I see and really give you I have a lot of work I've done on my channel already to support a lot of this. And really what I think here is that this electromagnetic radiation, it can disturb the structured living water network inside of our body. And like the water is what fills the majority of the space inside of our body. And it's not a dead deionized like water source like we've been using for our SAR calculations. It's a structured living network we're dealing with here, guys. And as you see down here on the bottom left of your screen, Gerald Pollock, he's done a lot of work on this. It's not actually H2O that is in the body. He's showing us that it's actually H3O2. I mean, our SAR calculations that Health Canada is using, they're not even close to considering any of this. And I think this is important because that living structured water network, it's connected with it's directly coupled into the fascia that works. It's like our wiring network inside of the body. And that is also coupled to an energy radiating system that's all around the body. So there's a completely different circuit here that I see that we could have this low chronic level of EMF could potentially be disturbing this network. And we're never going to know because we're not even considering it. We don't even think that we don't even know that it exists yet. But again, this is all theoretical at this point. All the work that I've done is I'm just putting, some theories out there that I see, and 100% more testing is required here. I'm not asking everybody to, take my word for it. We need to study this because this impacts everybody. Everybody is affected now because these frequencies are in our space. And from what I'm seeing, we don't really even have a choice anymore. They're just forcing it into our homes. And like I said earlier, the long-term exposure is really what we need to study more on, not just the short-term effects. We need to see how is this going to impair the body in the long run here. And we also need to look at the nature of these signals. You know, the way that the information is jumping around and how it's modulated. We have to study this. We can't just look at, the power density levels of the carrier frequency in the environment, like what Health Canada is doing, the building biologists are doing. This, to me, this is not good enough. We have to get into the information component and how this is really working here within the environment. Now, I'm hoping you guys are still with me. I really needed to cover all that. I'm hoping by now you can see what a massive mess that we're in. Now, I shouldn't say mess because we're making progress. We are making progress. This is going to take a considerable amount of time to get to where we need to get to. It's important to see that because a lot of these companies that are building these products, forcing them into our home, the standards that we are using are inadequate, like completely. So I'm hoping by now you can at least see that. That was my goal with the first part of this video. Now let's get into the actual testing results. I want to show you guys what I found. So if we look here on the left of your screen here, you can see this is really a typical installation that you're going to see, especially in the city. So if you look at the top here, we got the smart hydrometer. And on the right-hand side here, you can see I'm circling it with my mouse. This is the transmitter, the smart water meter transmitter. So really what I did is I did two tests, and I ran these two tests multiple times, like at different time periods throughout the day. And over multiple days, I kept doing these tests to see what I found. And I'm just going to show you guys really the conclusions here on what I found. But really the first test is what I did is I placed my meter about 15 feet away from this transmitter. And this is really into my main floor, into my house. So really this signal, it has to travel through the brick wall in my house into my main floor. Now, what's important is that since we're dealing with 900 megahertz frequency, this is a low band frequency that is known to really pass through walls effortlessly. So we're not going to see too much attenuation here with this specific frequency. So it's important to know that your brick wall is not really going to save you that much here. And you can see down here below, this is the meter that I used. I use some good quality meters here. This is an AIM-TTI spectrum analyzer. It's an industrial grade spectrum analyzer where I can really zoom in on this band of frequencies and really try and see what's going on here. So let's take a look at the results of the first test here. So you can see on the left-hand side of your screen, this is just a screenshot of my meter. Now I let the meter run for about 45 minutes. I really wanted to see really what was going on with the smart meter here on, over a good course of time. So if you look at the top here, you can see I started at 900 megahertz. I finished at 930. So I covered in, I'm really focusing in just on this band of frequencies. So you can look here, you can see down here at the bottom, we've got a yellow and a blue vertical line going upwards. And really what this is showing is that this is where the smart water meter is operating. It operates from between 910 to 920 megahertz. So really what I found here, if we look at in between this section here, this 910 to 920 megahertz, I'm really looking in at the peak levels of the power density that I'm measuring here. So if we take a look at all the data here that I have just underneath me here, I'm kind of circling it with my mouse. What my meter was measuring was 34.6 dBm. That seems to be the highest level of power that I was measuring within that band of frequencies that the smart water meter is operating on. And what that works out to be is about 0.4 microwatts of power. Now with my spectrum analyzer, what I'm measuring is absolute power. It's a little bit different from what these guidelines are allowing, which is they're measuring power density. So there is a little bit of a difference here, but for the purposes of what we're doing here, I think the measurements that I'm measuring here are adequate enough to show you a good idea of what's going on in the environment here. So with the building biologist guidelines, they say, anything less than 0.1 microwatts is not a concern. But what I'm measuring here, about 15 feet away from the device, I'm measuring about 0.4 microwatts of power. So that seems to, it could very well put us right in this range here, in the yellow range, where we have a slight, risk factor here for really altering the calcium channels within inside the cell. And again, this is really ambient electromagnetic radiation that's within our environment, at least from a perspective of being about 15 feet away from the transmitter. So if you guys have this in your home, you can kind of get an idea. You can take a look at where you would be 15 feet away from yours, and you get an idea of here what kind of power levels we're dealing with. Now, the last test that I did, I actually put my spectrum analyzer, I put it in my master bedroom. And this is the bedroom, this is the room in my house that's furthest away from the smart water meter and the smart meter. It's the furthest away. Now, from my rough calculations, when I put the spectrum analyzer on my bed, right where my pillow is, where I would be putting my head, the distance away from the transmitter, the smart meter and the smart water meter would be about 50 feet. So as you can see here, the levels that I'm measuring, you got this vertical yellow line here, this vertical blue line. This is showing you the activity within that band of frequencies. That could very well be my smart water meter. And really the peak level that I was measuring here, if you look at this section here with my mouse, you can see right here, it worked out to be about negative 49 dBm. And this was happening right around 912 megahertz, seemed to be the most active. And what this works out to be is about 12 nanowatts of power, which would be 0.012 microwatts. So what you can see here with this level that I'm measuring, it seems to fall right under the radar of what the building biologist guidelines would use. They say there's no risk factor if you're anything below 0.1 microwatts. And what I'm measuring is 0.012 microwatts. So what you're beginning to see here is that if I go within every room of my house, I'm going to be measuring this low-level electromagnetic radiation from my smart meters. It's going to be everywhere. It's going to be penetrating the space everywhere. And from the perspective of Health Canada Safety Code 6, not a problem. And from the perspective, if we look at the building biologist guidelines, they would also say no problem. But we have to wonder here, I'm raising, again, some more red flags because we have to look back at our iPhone. Our iPhone is designed to work at power levels that are like significantly lower than any of this. And they seem to make a connection and they can work fine, potentially. So we have to wonder what is going on within the human body when we're exposed to this low chronic ambient electromagnetic radiation from things like our smart meter at frequencies that are known to be absorbed by water. And guys, we have to study this more. We have to get into this more. And until we really get to that place, we're just going to continue to have problems like this. We're going to have companies designing products, saying it's safe, referencing certain standards, and we keep putting more and more and more devices like this out into our environment, like our homes. Until we get standards that are more accurate to how the human body functions, we're going to continue to have this problem. And I'm hoping by now you can see why it's just been a constant struggle for me with trying to consult people, trying to guide people how to make our environments safe. A lot of people are trying to, minimize a lot of the EMF in your house, and I think it's a great thing. People are getting to a place where they can only do so much. A lot of it is outside your house. It's coming from cell towers. It's coming from your neighbors. And a lot of people are, choosing to use EMF protection devices, things that help harmonize the environment. There's a lot of them out there. There are ones that we actually use too. And a lot of these EMF protection devices, I would say all of them, are not looking at how they're protecting us from that perspective here, from the level of the structured water within us. Because I think everything that we're seeing, whether it in how it, the EMF impacts DNA, the EMF impacts the calcium channels on the cell. I think these are downstream effects that happen first. The water itself is affected first. And that's truly what I think is happening here, guys. And we have to study this. We need to study this more. And I'm going to end this video here, just on that thought. And I hope this was helpful for you guys. And I thank you for watching.